Great. And I'm Brendan Richardson. Thank you for hosting us at Morven. This is an amazing place. I've never been on these grounds, and always wondered what was behind the gate as I ride my bike past here on the weekends. So it's amazing. I'd love to see more of it. Amar asked me to talk about entrepreneurship, and I'll talk a little bit about my background in a second, but the relevant piece is that I teach entrepreneurship at UVA at the Common School to mostly fourth-year students, not always, but predominantly fourth-year students. And I've noticed that lots of students have an idea, or actually lots of people have ideas about what entrepreneurship is, and they've never been exposed to it. And there's this sort of pervasive belief that entrepreneurs, great entrepreneurs, are born. And so if you weren't born with this entrepreneurial DNA, that you're destined to get a job and take a salary, and that entrepreneurs are special somehow. And I firmly don't believe that. And I think that there are ways that you can actually build what I call your entrepreneurial muscle. Okay? And it's pretty simple, but a lot of people don't ever get into entrepreneurship because they think that there's some magic to it, and there's no magic to it. It's like anything, right? It's like playing basketball, it's like learning how to ski, it's like learning biomedical engineering. You basically just keep working at it. Okay? The more you work at it, the better you are. And if you enjoy it, you actually get better at it because you work more at it. So I'm going to run quickly through these slides. I'd love to make it interactive, so if you have questions along the way, stop me. And at the end, we've got plenty of time, hopefully, for questions. So I'm going to run through them quickly, but if somebody's not making sense, raise your hand, stop me, cut me off, and we'll go back. Okay? So basically, entrepreneurship, if you boil it all down, in my mind, is an attitude. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit about what that attitude is. This is me. I'm an adjunct professor at the university teaching entrepreneurship and venture capital. My background is that I spent 17 years living in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Most of that time I was a venture capitalist, investing in startups. Okay? I spent a lot of time investing in startups both in the US and in Europe, so I've seen a lot of cultural differences about how entrepreneurs think. And when I wasn't being a VC, when I moved back to Charlottesville, I spent most of my time working with startups, launching startups. I'm the CEO of a small startup semiconductor company here in Charlottesville that's spinning some technology out of UVA. So I've kind of seen entrepreneurship from a lot of different angles, from the top, from the bottom, from the side. So lots of people approach me. When I was a VC, I got approached all the time by people that wanted to be an entrepreneur. Right? So I thought before we started, we'd do a little self-test. If you want to be an entrepreneur, let's just go through and figure out if you've got the right stuff. Okay? So the must-haves for entrepreneurship that most people think about are you need $1 million idea, or even better, you need $1 billion idea. Right? That's actually not true at all. Or you need some sort of natural genius, right, for creative thinking so that you can actually come up with one of these ideas. Also not true. Another myth is that you need a business background, or preferably an MBA, right, so that you understand how to build a business from the ground up, or you understand how profit and loss work. In my experience, you decidedly do not need a business background. In fact, business backgrounds can hinder you in being an entrepreneur, mostly because they limit your thinking to a certain way that things are done. Okay? And classically, the entrepreneur is a big risk taker, right? They're willing to bet the farm on this little idea and build this big business that turns into Facebook or something like Google. Nope, not true. Okay? Most entrepreneurs that I know are not risk takers at all. They're not gamblers. They don't like Vegas. They don't like putting it all on black. Okay? They're methodical about how they go about building their businesses and where they start. None of that's true. Okay? I posit that entrepreneurs are made, not born. Or put another way, that we're all born as entrepreneurs. We're all born with entrepreneurial genes, and that it's activated in some of us and not in others. And I know this is true because when you look at kids, right, from newborns up to about 6 or 7 years old, every child exhibits the DNA traits of an entrepreneur. Okay? And we'll go through what those are in a second. And then over time, we basically suppress those. Society suppresses them. We basically start to play nice in the sandbox. And our entrepreneurial traits get deactivated. So it's just a matter, in my view, of reactivating that DNA inside of you, right? And we'll talk about how you do that in a second. So self-task number 2, the useful traits that are really helpful for being an entrepreneur are that you have to be okay with failure, okay? We'll get into this in a little bit, but failure is a big part of being an entrepreneur, right? You're going to fail. There's going to be a lot of it, and you might as well get used to it. You need to develop a strong contrarian streak, okay? Contrarian streak being independent thinking, right? And independent thinking meaning that you're not just taking an opposite point of view of what everybody else is thinking, but that you're actually thinking for yourself, okay? You need to be decidedly okay with lots of uncertainty, right? Entrepreneurship is often fraught with chaos, uncertainty, and making decisions in a cloud of doubt, okay? If you like things ordered, if you like things sort of serially lined up and the path very clear, entrepreneurship is going to be a tough road. It's going to make you really uncomfortable. You've got to love frustration, right? Everybody loves frustration, right? I'm joking slightly about this, but there's lots of frustration in entrepreneurship. When you're building something from scratch that's never been done before, count on lots and lots and lots of frustration, okay? This turns out to be a really good thing, because frustration, like necessity, is the mother of great ideas, okay? But most important of all, you've got to be this, relentlessly resourceful. If you look at every entrepreneur that's succeeded, whether you know who they are or whether they're successful in building a small dry cleaning business or a farm from scratch, they are all relentlessly resourceful, right? I don't think we need to define this, but in your mind, you understand what relentlessly resourceful means. It means not giving up and figuring out a way to get around frustrations and obstacles and blocks. And you need to be persistent, right? The number one trait of successful entrepreneurs is persistence. Just don't give up. Keep working at it. In spite of the failure, in spite of the frustration, etc. Entrepreneurs are violent optimists, right? They wake up every day, they look in the mirror, and they think to themselves, today's the day we're going to win that sale. Today's the day this is going to work. In spite of all the evidence, you know, for the last 50 days or 100 days or 350 days, that it wasn't working. They wake up again and again and again, violently optimistic. Okay? And you can build that strength. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, a lot of times, I'm in my VC days, I had people come to me and say, I've got a great idea. I've got this great idea, right? And I say, wonderful. That's fantastic. Great ideas are essential. But the great idea is only essential as a starting point. Okay? The value of a great idea by itself, what is it?
It's only a wish.
Right. How much is it worth in dollars? A great idea, like an amazing idea, like a Facebook idea. How much is it worth? 0. Thank you. It's not worth anything, right? It's worth nothing. The value comes in executing the idea and building the idea out, making it concrete in the world, right? In your head, it's worth nothing. And turning an idea into something concrete means action, and more action, and more action. And action in a direction that most people are going to tell you is the wrong direction. That it's going to be failure, that it's not going to work, etc. And an important point is not every idea is equally likely to succeed, right? So even things that appear to be great ideas in your head often have fatal flaws that you won't know until you begin to execute that idea, right? And that's okay. That happens with every startup. It happens with every entrepreneur. As they move forward and lead into their idea, things pop up, sometimes fatal things. The idea is not worth pursuing. And most entrepreneurs fail on their first idea and their second idea. And almost all successful entrepreneurs do not look like the people you think. They don't look like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, people that succeeded on the first time, built huge businesses, and stayed there all the way through, with the exception of Steve, who left and started Pixar and then came back to Apple. Okay? So let's talk about those guys for a second, right? You know those guys. Steve, Bill, that's Sergey and Larry, or Larry and Sergey, and that guy's Mark Zuckerberg. Who's heard of Google? Anybody? Anybody use Google? Okay. So what's the commonality between all these 4 people, or these 5 people? Other than that they're super wealthy, Steve's estate is now wealthy, and together they've created $1 trillion in market capitalization.
Technology.
Technology, okay, that's one. What about the individuals?
They all dropped out.
Yeah, well, those 2 didn't drop out, but the other 3 dropped out. Okay? When they started their businesses, look, none of them had ever started a business before. None of them had ever done anything of consequence in their life. They were all in college or graduate school. And when they started, right, there's the first Apple computer. That's the program, that's the computer that Bill Gates was programming for when he first started Microsoft. That's the first homepage of Google. They called it Backrub. Okay? This was the thing that they put up on the Stanford intranet so that students could find information better. That was the start of Google. Okay? And this guy, you've probably all seen The Social Network, right? He was trying to come up with a hot or not page so that he could figure out what classes to take to sit next to hot women. Okay? Today, those companies have created things that pervade all of our lives in ways that we would have never imagined. Okay? The key is, when they started, they weren't starting a business. None of them had an interest in starting a business. They were starting something because they were passionate about fixing a problem that they had or building something that they really wanted for themselves. Okay? So these magical, amazing, hyper-talented entrepreneurs that we sort of deify in our culture started right where you guys are sitting today. They were no different than you. They were basically, well, if you look across all of them and you basically look here, they were all a little socially maladjusted, right? A little weird, a little kind of like, right? Nobody would have predicted back then that any of them would have been anything. Nor, when anybody looked at this stuff back then that knew anything about anything, would have predicted that any of this stuff would have been built up into what it became. And the point is that the ideas at the very beginning don't look like disruptive big ideas. They don't look like they're going to be successful. And that's okay. You've got to live with that and just keep focusing on doing something and iterating something that you want solved for yourself.